Today, we're going to react to some interesting financial advice that I see all over social media. And some is just terrible. Some is overly risky. And I always try to remember, figure out what your goals are and not what someone else thinks you should be doing as far as financially, investing wise, all those kind of things. And so today, I wanted to react to a few people. You know them all pretty well on some of the videos that they had made or clips of some of their videos that we made. So today, I'm going to start off with video number 1 with Ramit Sethi, and Ramit's talking about why renting might actually be, smarter than buying. And in some cases, I would never say you shouldn't rent. But yes, this video it's very interesting to watch. So here you go, see what you think, and then we can discuss it.
Sometimes it can actually be a better financial decision to rent than to own. Let me explain, because a lot of people listening are going, this guy just said the sky's green. This makes no sense. Let me give you an example. I've lived in San Francisco, New York, LA. 3 very expensive cities.
Sure.
In each of those cities, it was cheaper for me to rent than to own. When I lived a few blocks from here, let's say that my rent was $3,000 a month. I kept a very close eye on the market. There was a building right next to me. Same square footage, same view, same number of bathrooms and bedrooms. It would have cost $6,400 a month to own when I factored in all the phantom costs, taxes, interest, maintenance, opportunity cost. So I didn't want to own. I didn't want the maintenance.
Yep.
I just said, I'm going to keep renting. I took the difference and I invested it. And I made way more than I ever would have made owning. So what's my message? It's that you need to run the numbers on the biggest purchase of your life.
Yeah.
And you should never feel guilty about renting.
Okay, so he talks about never feeling guilty when you're renting, and I can understand that. But he always wants to talk about the cost of living in San Francisco, LA, New York, really expensive areas. And yes, in many of these places, it is cheaper on a monthly basis to rent versus own. But as someone who's been in real estate for a really long time, the biggest issue that we have with real estate right now is housing affordability. And so for many people, they can't even afford the rent at $3,000, let alone say, oh, I've got $6,400 and I'm just going to rent for $3,000 and take the $3,400 difference and invest it. And what always makes me laugh is we loves to talk about phantom costs. Well, first of all, things like property taxes, HOA fees, your interest on your loan when you're buying something, those are not phantom costs. Those are costs that are built right into your payment. The only things that might be a little up in the air would be things like maintenance. But again, people always say when you're the renter, you just pay rent and that's it. I also do property management for a living, and there are certain times when a renter will damage a house and it is not the owner's responsibility. It's something that the renter would have to pay for. So it's not this automatic that as a renter, you're going to pay rent and you always call the landlord and never have to do anything different. And so again, it would be amazing if you could say, yeah, I'm going to rent for $3,000 a month. I'm going to take $3,400 a month and use that for investing and make a bunch of money in the long term. But what he fails to understand is that most people can't afford the $3,000, let alone the $6,400. So I just think that it's not really advice for the masses. It might be advice for a very small number of people, which again leads me right into video number 2. Same person, Ramit, again, who I like a lot of the information he puts out there, but he likes to tell you you're never going to get rich by just cutting back. And I'm going to show you that you can. But first, let's watch his video.
Oh, hey, everybody. Save $3 a day, $5 a day. And then when you're 990 years old, you can afford to buy a pair of jeans. What the f***? Guys, you're wasting your time playing small. I don't care how many budgeting spreadsheets you have, how many little tabs you have. Oh, I use Copilot. It's so cool. The maximum you can cut your expenses is what? 20%? 30%? Okay, but your income, you can grow that by 50%, 100%, even 250% if you focus on the right things.
So he says you're never going to rich by cutting back. And he makes fun of people actually trying to save $3, $5, $10 a day. And when you're 990 years old, you can buy a pair of jeans. I'm not sure why he's so demeaning. I'm not sure why he's so angry and he needs to act a fool. But yes, you might only be able to cut cost 20 or 30%. I'm not sure who I know that's increased their income by 50, 100, or 200%. And he says, focus on the right things. Well, if you focus on the right things, I'm going to show you, going back to our trusty dusty investment calculator, how you can make those things happen for yourselves. And so if we go to that investment calculator again, and we start when we're 25 to 65. And again, Dave Ramsey's website has a great one. If you go to tools, then investment calculators, and I'm going to show you how by cutting costs, just $3 or $5 or $10 a day, can make a massive difference in your long-term wealth building. So again, if you go right to the investment calculator, type in 25 years old, retire at 65 years old, which you probably will still keep working at that point, and then put in, you don't have any money to start with. And $3 a day would be $90 a month. And we're going to use 10% interest as far as what you can earn. And over that time period, you're going to put in a little over $43,000 and you're going to end up with almost $570,000 if you just did $3 a day. And if you notice, your investments grew. Only 8% of this money was your $43,000. The 92% was just investment growth over 40-year time frame. And those numbers don't change as far as the second one at $5 a day, $150 a month. Again, you put in now $72,000 and you end up with just under $950,000. And again, you invested 8% and the 92% was growth. And for a measly $10 a day or $300 a month, you're going to put in $144,000 and you end up with almost $1.9 million. So you can get rich by cutting back. Ideally, you're going to be smart. You're going to have a budget. You're going to cut back. You're also hopefully going to be able to increase your income. So instead of doing $3 or $5 or $10 a day, you can do $25 or $50 or even $100 a day. And imagine what these numbers will look like. They're going to grow exponentially. So we're going to show you these again right on the Dave Ramsey website. You can go there and play with the numbers and dream big. If you start putting in a lot more money, you're going to be shocked at how big those investments are going to grow to. All right, so this leads us right into the next video, which is Codie Sanchez, she's huge online. If you've seen her videos, I like a lot of what she talks about and does. She's always talking about buying businesses and how many older people are going to want to sell their businesses and all those kind of things. But today what she said was, real estate is actually an awful way for you to make money. And I want to talk about that. But first, let's watch her video about what she has to say.
Real estate is an awful way for you to actually make money. Option one, you can go buy a single family home for $400,000, the average price in the US, and then you rent it out to somebody. Well, the average rent nets you, profit-wise, about $167 a month. So you're taking a $400,000 risk for a couple $100 a month. Then you take the average small business, you could buy same way you could for buying a piece of real estate. So $400,000 business, you put some money down and get the rest from the SBA or seller financing, and the average small business makes 10 to 15% per year. You're cash flowing tens of thousands of dollars from a business instead of real estate.
All right, so she's trying to compare investing in a single family home to owning a small business. And she used the $400,000 number. So if you were going out today's world and buying a $400,000 single family home, she was basically saying that you're only going to profit $167 a month, and that would be in cash flow. I'm assuming most rentals, you got to put 20 or 25% down, but they're not talking about all the other ways you make money. That $400,000 asset's going to become more valuable. Over time, you're going to pay that loan down. You have depreciation and tax benefits. There's a lot more to owning single family homes than just that cash flow, especially right at the beginning. And a lot of times they're looking at it only in the current environment that we're sitting in right now. And again, I went out about rental homes 3 or 4 years ago, and I was getting rates at 3.5%, 4.5% interest. And I had homes that I was literally making anywhere between $500 and $800 a month in cash flow right off the bat. So maybe right now in today's world, buying a single family home isn't a fantastic investment, but it's really meant to be a long-term play. You're not really trying to make a bunch of money in the short term on cash flow. The goal is to try to build up your net worth that ideally someday you'll own a bunch of single family homes free and clear. We can talk about everyone borrowing against the equities and all that stuff for another day. But small business, if you go out and buy a small business, I love how she says you only have to put a small amount of money down. They don't talk about how much. And whether you get seller financing or an SBA loan, and you're just going to earn 10 or 15%, I know that many small businesses go out of business. And they never talk about the risk factors between a single family home and a small business. And so, for example, I realize you're out buying a business, so this isn't a brand new start from scratch, but new businesses, 20% fail within the first year, 50% fail within the first 5 years. Even if you get in a business like real estate agents don't last particularly more than 3 years, most of them. And so going and just starting a new business from someone who owned a business, who maybe the reason their business is successful because they have a bunch of contacts and relationships and people that they work with is part of why the business is successful, isn't this slam dunk that everyone thinks it is. It's like businesses never fail. And not only that, now you're dealing with products, you're dealing with employees. I know she loves to talk about laundromats, but now you're dealing with washers and dryers and facilities. And do you own your building or do you lease your space? There's just so many more factors involved than just this, hey, a $400,000 house cash flow is $167 a month, and a small business, you're going to make 10 or 15% every year on your money. It's not that simple, and it drives me crazy how they try to make one look bad and one look good. And in reality, you can do either one. It just depends on where you are currently in your life financially to see what makes sense. So again, I would love to have a broader conversation with her about this one, but it just drives me crazy when they're trying to just crap on single family homes, which leads me right into video number 4, which we're talking about Grant Cardone. And if you don't know Grant's all about multifamily, and he thinks single-family homes are a terrible investment. And I think sometimes he doesn't differentiate between the single-family home that's your primary residence that you live in versus potentially single-family homes that would be investment. But he's the multifamily guy. So see what he has to say right here, and then we can talk about it.
Why is this house the worst investment you've ever made?
Because it's dead money. I mean, it's, anybody that buys a single family home is, you're probably out sequence on what people should do if they want to build wealth. Like if you just want a place that you're like, oh, this is mine, which is not. It's the banks. It's the banks, the states, because the property taxes, if you don't pay your mortgage and you don't pay the state, they're going to come take your house. So it's not really your house. Even when it's paid off, it's not your house. It's a terrible investment. Okay, over time, if you look at 100 years, the average house has gone up 1% a year. Doesn't even keep up with inflation. Your money could have been better utilized in a business, starting a company, growing yourself, self-development, or investing in the stock market, or more importantly, maybe even other real estate in your market.
So I don't know what you thought about that one, but here's the thing. He talks about if you don't pay your mortgage, if you don't pay your property taxes, if you don't pay your insurance, if you don't pay your HOA fees, they're going to come take your home. Well, last I checked, whether it's the home you live in or a rental home or some sort of multifamily building, the same rules apply. If you own a multifamily building as an investment and you stop paying the mortgage on it, because they always want you to have a mortgage on it, they're all about having maximum amount of debt as possible. And the second you build up some equity to refinance that bad boy and take that money out because they can't tax you on debt, it's the same principles apply. So I'm not sure why he feels that having multifamily, I guess, because in his brain, it's a better investment. You have more renters, more things, all that stuff. That's great. The other thing is, he said home prices over the last 100 years have gone up only 1% per year. Well, then I have some questions for someone who does real estate for a living is, why are we having all these affordability issues if prices have only gone up 1% per year when we know incomes at least have gone up that much? And the other thing is, for example, I can talk about my house that I live in. I bought my house 6 years ago for $435,000. And I know for sure I could sell my house for probably $650,000, the exact same model that I could walk to in 30 seconds, which is actually a little bit nicer house than mine, literally just sold for almost $700,000. So I'm not sure how you go in 6 years from $435,000 to almost $700,000, and that's 1% per year. So I don't know where he's getting that number either. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I just know he's not a fan of single family homes. And then lastly, he's always talking about using your money for building a business or starting a company or growing yourself. And you know what? Not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Not everybody wants to own their own business. Not everybody's looking to have this grind of 80-hour weeks to be able to just always grow, rich. Not everyone wants to be a trillionaire, a billionaire. So for some of you, you know what? Sticking with single family homes isn't a terrible idea. But yes, you should think of the home you live in differently than the homes you buy as rental houses, because there are definitely different ways about figuring out the viability of them, figuring out how the tax consequences work. And of course, one is an actual investment. You have to live somewhere. And so trying to figure out that whole situation about what's a better investment, we can have those conversations. But always talking about how everything's a terrible investment besides what he likes to invest in just doesn't make any sense to me. And so this leads us right into the last video of the day, which is from the Money Guy Show. And they talk about house hacking. And if you're not sure what house hacking is, we're going to show you a quick video about this real quick. And then I'm going to talk about pros and cons and what I think about this one, because I know, especially for a lot of our younger viewers, this is one where you see people my age say, hey, if I was in my 20s again, here's what I would do. And they go tell you to do this house hacking. So let me know what you think.
House hacking is legit. Why is house hacking such a profitable or good thing is that it takes advantage of the fact that when you get your mortgage, they give you preferential treatment for your primary residence. So you are actually buying your primary residence. That's what allows you to have a lower down payment of 3 to 5%. And also, because you're living there, the bank thinks you're less of a risk because you need shelter. So they allow you to do this. So you can't use this strategy to buy the house and then move out very quickly, because that might be mortgage fraud. But this does work very well if you want to take on a roommate, buy a duplex, a triplex, or a quadplex. This is what makes it a hack, is that you're the landlord that's also living in it as your primary residence. On paper, this is great, but just make sure it aligns with your goals and the needs of your family.
So the part he ended with, making sure it aligns with the goals of your family, that was the most important part. But anytime you hear the words, it looks good on paper, or mortgage fraud, those are things you have to be careful with. But what a house hack really is this. If you buy a duplex, a threeplex, or a fourplex, you can still get traditional residential financing. And what they would tell young people to do is go get a loan. And if you're living there in one of the units as your primary residence, then it's not an investment property. So you can buy it for 3 to 5% down, which all that is smart and legit. But here's the thing. For most young people that maybe never owned real estate before, one, you're buying a multifamily building, which typically where I live at least means they're older, they have more deferred maintenance, they just aren't in the greatest neighborhoods because they just haven't been built in a long time. So a lot of them are run down and beat down, have old systems and things on those lines. And so because of that, what they're asking someone to do for their first residence ever is buy a multifamily, live in one, and now let's say you have a fourplex. The other 3 units are your renters that basically now live with you in the same building. And not only that, you've never done a lease. You've never had to kick anybody out. What about vacancies? And then, of course, just maintaining and dealing with this whole entire property. It's just, in theory, a good idea. But I know people said, hey, if I was in my 20s or I was, my age and went back to my 20s, what I would do is do this, live in it for a year, do it again, and then do it again. And now I'd have 12 doors or whatever, how many doors they want to have if they're doing a little bit smaller units. But it is something that can work. But for many people, I searched for it myself recently for multifamily buildings that were 40 units and under where I live in Reno, Nevada. And it was just like not a lot of great opportunities, not a lot of great properties, and they're expensive for what you get, but they can be easier to qualify. They can be a way to get in the real estate game where you can buy rentals and have somewhere to live at the same time. But you have to make sure it aligns with what you're trying to do because, again, this can be a dangerous game when you start buying these type of properties. And it's something you need to know about because if you've never been a landlord and you've never been a homeowner, and now you're going to try to do all those things at once and live in the same building with those renters, that cannot be a great thing for all people. So with that being said, if you have questions about any of these topics or other things financial, the biggest thing is to make sure you do what makes sense to you, your wealth building, your strategy, your financial plan, to make sure you're doing what makes sense to you and not always listening to the other people that have different goals and different agendas for what they think makes the most sense, whether it is buying big multifamily apartment units, which if you do that, that's commercial lending. That sometimes is private financing or seller financing, and that becomes a whole nother game in itself. Again, it can work. It just may not be something you do early in your career. Whether something like Cody's talking about where you're saying buy a business, if that works for you, great. It may not be something you want to do. And then again, early on, what drives me crazy about what Ramit is saying is I disagree in the fact that small changes can make a huge difference. So whether it is just starting out and creating proper budgets, proper financial plans, trying to figure out a way to make more and spend less and be debt-free as far as consumer debt, there's lots of ways you can win at this game. So if you're seeing videos out there that you want me to talk about, by all means, DM me, shoot me content that you think would be interesting for me to give my opinion on. And just know, do what makes sense to you. And you don't always have to listen to people that think they know everything about everything, because sometimes they really don't.